So maybe if I can start with Vignesh.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks again for inviting me. So pleasure being here. So my name is Vignesh. I'm part of a company called Wipro Limited. So we're one of the largest technology service company. So I basically take care of the blockchain practice focused towards the Middle East and African market.
Very good. Thank you very much. Next, can I please call upon Salim?
Yes, good afternoon all. My name is Salim Hassan. I'm the founder and CEO of Privity FZ LLE, a venture-focused advisory firm I set up in Dubai in 2004. I look globally for interesting 0 to 1 innovative disruptive technologies that I would like to back and build. And to date, I've backed about a dozen to 15 early stage technology investments from Dubai here. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Next, it's Dr. Waterhouse.
Hi, yeah, Stephen Waterhouse, CEO and co-founder of Orchid Labs. I was also a co-founder of Pantera Capital in 2013.
Okay, great. And where are you based?
You know, a good secret agent never reveals their location.
That's a very good answer. A man of mystery. Okay, and is it Michael that I'm also asking for?
Yes, hi there.
Hi, Michael.
Michael Rothman. Well, good to meet you.
Stick finger.
Okay, just I guess just holding a stick is
Oh.
boy. So if possible.
Finger.
Welcome to the
Hi there. Shall we begin again? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I think we're being Zoom bombed.
Yeah.
Yeah, Zoom bombed. All right. Well, look, I'm flattered that people took the attention to attack us. We can talk about that in a minute. So my name is Michael O'Loughlin. I'm an Irishman in Berlin, in Germany. And I have a consulting group, and its primary purpose, it's called O'Loughlin, great imagination there. And primary focus is to help central banks and banks navigate the ever-changing world of payments primarily, but also fintech and regulation. So working very closely with central banks and regulation and how to create future regulators. So that's what I do. Nice to be on the call with you guys. I think we've lost our host, have we? I'll jump in. Salim, do you want to go next? Introduce yourself. Nice to meet you.
I just did, as a matter of fact. I don't know if you heard me, but
okay.
Our host asked me to do it after Vignesh, so I was second. I think you were probably the last of the four to get introduced. So I think from that point of view, I think we've done the introductions, and now we're waiting for the host to come back to start, I guess.
All right.
So we've got two people from Dubai, one out of Berlin, and one a secret agent, by the sounds of it.
I think we're all secret agents.
well, I mean, in terms of, you know, where we're located.
I'm normally located in San Francisco.
Got you. Thank you, sir.
So the company is headquartered.
Okay, it seems that Helen has some issues. So we'll continue like that in a decentralized manner. I'll pick up the question. So I'll just throw a question and we can continue discussing it and then answer questions from the audience and from each other. So yeah, the question for me that actually I am dealing with that the governance and decentralization. Like yesterday, I looked in my old papers and found 2016 document, a draft of the law for the decentralized auction here in Ukraine, which we were working on that time. And that hasn't passed. The system that we developed wasn't installed anywhere. And actually, because also the lawyers had big difficulties, like governance. So if you think about decentralized system, like the first question is like, who is actually responsible for updates? Who is responsible for bugs? Who should provide software? And if it's a decentralized system, but only one party provides updates, like, is it really a decentralized system? So the questions like that were not resolved at that time. And please share your experience on what do you see in the world, which examples of decentralization and governance you see that are like remarkable or maybe failed, but we can learn from these mistakes too. Who will be the first? Slim.
I think I can jump in. I think
Okay.
I think in DeFi we've seen a lot of experiments in governance. It's not clear to me that this is real governance that is happening versus just incentivized airdrops for participation, which is designed to increase token value and just sort of be favorable for the token economics. So I think failed examples of this are obviously something like SushiSwap, where there was this big rush to be part of the governance or kind of acquire these tokens that would then go up in value and the farming happening and so on. But then we find out that one of the largest holders then dumps it and then he comes back, sources it to someone else. So there's also kind of like chaotic kind of thing. I think that what Uniswap did following that was kind of a brilliant move. And I'm hoping that these experiments in governance continue in DeFi, but are done in a more responsible way. It's not clear to me that the kind of what's called the fair launch process, where there's this idea that you don't need investors, you don't need founders, you just need a bunch of code that somebody magically throws together and then throws out there, and then the community owns it. I think this is a really strange evolution of thinking. Perhaps the kind of concept of the trading community is taking things a bit too far. I still believe that having great founders, having good investors with connections, and I think that was proven out by Uniswap, who were able to list on Binance and Coinbase the day after they announced the governance program.
Yeah, if I can add from my perspective, see, predominantly our clients have been mostly government and enterprises. So I could see from the governance aspect, I can give an example of a governance which is working well. For example, Smart Dubai government. So in that case, you need to have, when you do an enterprise or a government public sector based use cases on blockchain, what we could see is they're predominantly a sponsor of the network. To govern the entire network. So in this case, Smart Dubai in Dubai, they basically created a governance framework where they are the promoters of the network. The promoters basically call the shots, and basically they will invite the other participants to be part of this network. So very successful example, and they've implemented some live use cases. But at the same time, we could see challenges when we talk to private players like banks. So I've been having conversation with a lot of banks where, especially around, we want to create a network, banking network, right? One of the questions that we face, major problem is who will run the network, who owns the governance of this network, who's the promoter of the network, and because it's a system where you need to have participants, you need to have founding members, so there should be roles and alignments that has to be assigned to each of these participants. So we are facing issues in the governance from that perspective. So these are some of the examples I thought I'll probably highlight from the governance perspective.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that as well. I think you could almost draw a parallel to what's going on with the directive or suggestion from Lagarde here in Europe with regards to stablecoin, and the idea that the private sector would be almost banned from building out their own stable coins, and this should be left to the central banks and regulators to explore further. So you see a kind of a blurring of lines and maybe an overreach or a stepping that could be seen as a central body preventing or stifling innovation. You know, there are good examples of regulation today in place where without it you wouldn't be able to herd the cats on the financial institution side. You wouldn't see the great innovation on the fintech side as a result, for example, open banking with PSD2. But I do think that, you know, there are highly efficient blockchain platforms out there today. It's only going to get more efficient as others drop off and more investment goes in. With regards to whose its responsibility, I think the responsibility still has to go back. If you're talking about governance and decentralization, even its decentralization, you know, that refers to the restructuring or the reorganization of an authority, and passing that responsibility out to other bodies, be that local or regional. And as we look at our technologies, we're in a very privileged position. We're all in different geographies around the world. The internet is global, borderless. And I think that's becoming a more and more difficult position for the likes of the previously rule-setting bodies to maintain their relevance and foothold. You know, and we could go off into many tangents there, but I think any decentralization is a good thing. But I do think from a reporting structure to avoid chaos, there would need to be a real-time reporting structure. So in the future, we could see smart regulators. I think that's the buzzword at the moment of the future, being able to audit the private sector in real time without prior notice. So there's very much the fear factor of Big Brother in that case. But yeah, I think there still needs to be a central government, but the technology in the private sector, I think we can't really hold back the inevitable, which is true innovation that side.
If I can just add, when this topic was brought to my attention, I was invited by the Futurism Forum. I was very intrigued because the two words, decentralization and governance, I need to understand, I need to approach this from an academic standpoint. So for total transparency, I did some research and I came across a very interesting paper that was published in March this year by Andres Witter and Gilles Heisenberg, which I've actually shared on Privity's landing page on LinkedIn. So for anybody offline who wants to know where I'm citing a lot of this information from, because I think it's very pertinent to today's call, feel free to go there. So the title of this is actually dovetailing into today's topic around the coexistence of a decentralized state and a state of government. So the first thing I did was trying to understand the topology of governance. And typically we've grown up where it's all hierarchical, okay? And today networks are becoming more horizontal. That's the first thing. You have to understand the topology of it as well and what is happening within this topology. So advancements in the digital domain, for example, in blockchain technology, big data, machine learning, have increasingly shaped the lives of individuals, groups, organizations, societies as we all know it today. The policy making is increasingly moving away from top-down governance by the state towards a more horizontal mode of governance. And this is, I think, the first point one has to take into mind. Once you understand the shift that's happening and then how this network evolves and the different type of networks that are taking place and the exponential technologies that are fueling the growth of these networks, specifically AI, blockchain, and so on and so forth, then you can start to get your head round. Because I personally think the conclusion from this article this paper that I read, and it's quite a detailed and very academic paper, was that neither of them, in fact, what is happening, we're moving into a more fluid environment where the power varies from actor to actor depending on where they fit in this ecosystem, as it were. So today, for example, the very large tech companies are the owners of the platform. Inside that, they exercise a certain amount of governance towards those people who participate in their system. And this is probably one of the most threatening aspects of those platforms, which has obviously caught the attention of the regulators and in the US, for example, which is why they're pulling all these technology titans into Washington and drilling them as to what's going on, because they suddenly feel they're not in a position to exercise a certain amount of control on them, much that they would like to. And of course, what happens in their fiefdom is left to their own devices. So again, I start with giving that observation. And of course, I'll let my fellow panelists add more, but I just wanted to set the scene, based upon what I read and I understood. And I can see where these problems can come out of once you understand the topology. So I'll take a pause there.
Okay, I will ask one controversial question. Do you agree or not, or it's not relevant? People say that code is law. Do you agree?
Well, I mean, if you go back to the time of Hammurabi in history, where he wrote the Hammurabi Code, what was that? Law. So code over time, over history, has evolved and progressed. And I would say, yes, to some extent, today with the 21st century modern day lens, I would argue, yes, it is law of some sorts. Yes, I would argue that.
I mean, I'd say if you compare the legal system to a computer programming system, then it's kind of similar. I mean, I used to be involved in intellectual property law, and that has a lot of similarities to looking at code when you're looking at patent claims. But the compilers are multifaceted, right? So you take the US system, you can have a case that might go to appeal on a lower court and then finally moves all the way up and may end up in the Supreme Court. So it's not like you have a one-step compiler. This function is being adjusted over time. But I mean, yeah, I guess in the concept of smart contracts, there are some challenges with trying to put law into smart contracts, which is that you could end up with a system which has such rigidity that it doesn't have the ability to withstand the test of time. So I think I'd be a little concerned about a society that was only built around smart contracts that were so rigid that they couldn't be adjusted later. I think at that point we're being governed by AIs and we have a different enemy to fight.
Okay. Michael, what would you say?
Is it law? I mean, look, at the end of the day, code is written by humans right now. And
most of it.
Yeah, right now. Yeah.
Good point, yeah.
Code that we follow with our super intelligence book beside us here. Code that we follow is written by humans, and I think it can be, if there is a consensus that code in particular in that standalone piece or occasion is law, then yeah, it's law. I mean, but you could say that to anything. I think it's all has to be written in context. How the code of society and the code of law in society, that's a different argument, but more theoretical at this point. If you talk about blockchain technology, the point of the conference of the call, yeah, we could debate that on smart contracts and how valid they are in different regions. But again, it all falls back in under the umbrella of law by state, as it is today.
I think also if you look at the growth of oracles within smart contracts, then many times an oracle is required to test the real world event that is being triggered by the smart contract. So it's like, if there's some smart contract that says, if you see this particular storm happening in this region, then you pay this out, kind of an insurance claim. well, did the storm really happen? I don't know. Like, who's going to say it did or it didn't? What if somebody fakes it? You know, how do you adjust that? Now, storms are pretty easy because you can do that with computers, but there's a lot of other variables once you think about the more general context of the law that would need potentially some kind of human oracle. But maybe in the future they also get replaced by AIs, and as I said, then we're in a whole different world of concern.
Mm. Okay, then I have another controversial question, which is some data that should not be public. There was a case when some German legislator found that some illicit adult content being hashed or links being posted in Bitcoin blockchain. And by another law, servers should not store such content, but effectively every miner was such a server.
Pavel, I think you're on 2 mics at the
Echo,
moment.
yeah.
And another one.
Yeah, distributed lab needs to mute.
Он не замьючен.
You were getting an echo, yeah.
Just 1 second.
You can mute distributed lab, yeah.
Там никто не замьючен.
Okay, now you're on
Okay,
mute.
we have one of the organizers. Okay, so some links to bad content, let's say the prohibited content, was posted on Bitcoin blockchain, and effectively every miner became the holder of it. And you cannot delete something from Bitcoin blockchain. And obviously that created a kind of precedent and a situation that had no solution. So what would you say about that? Like, one law says that you should not keep such content. From the other side, decentralized immutable system says like, oh, well, this hashes and digital signatures and everything.
If I can add on to that, from the conversations with the current system or the current implementation that we are doing. So these are the major problem. What is that actually has to get into blockchain, right? So one thing that we suggest not to have personal PII data, that has to be added on the blockchain because it's very critical. You don't add any personal information. Another thing that we do is we use a combination of both private and public blockchain. So certain things we make sure that it is put it in the private space, and especially in, for example, I'll give you an example where entities in Middle East they don't want their data to be exposed outside the region, right? So in that case, we just put the data inside the private blockchain. And some of this, yes, for example, I want to prove that something that I want to prove public. Then I put it in the public blockchain. That can be that you're not worried about your data exposed. In that case, I just create a hash, just put it in a Bitcoin blockchain, an Ethereum blockchain, whatever I want. But it depends on the architecture. It depends on the use case and also requirement of who you're actually building this platform for. So this is the answer from my side. Okay,
so basically all data that's coming in is always processed first on the private level and then hashed in the public level. So you don't.
Correct. It depends on the use case. For example, digital identity. I'm planning to do a digital identity system. I can't directly create a digital identity system on a public data. This is what my belief is, especially if you're exposing to certain data, personal data. You just have to be very make sure what you are actually putting. First, you have to know what you're trying to put in the blockchain, not to use any PII data. The second, the data you want to expose on public blockchain.
Understood. Technically, the company that will be doing that will anyway maintain a public node. And if public node is accessible again freely, then data which put by another person will be in there and could be queried.
Yeah.
So you can make a filter, I think, something like that. But
I mean, I think there have been some treatments of this in fiction. Neil Stephenson's latest book talks about how, in his version of the future, social networks die. And the idea is that if somebody, for example, posts some information about you online and, it's kind of like, is it fake news? Is it not? Well, a solution is if you've got enough resources and money to do this, you just flood the entire internet. Instead of trying to take down everything about you, you just flood the internet with all sorts of stories about you until there are so many stories about you that no one can tell which is real and which is not. And so I think any open system has the potential to get flooded with data that could eventually potentially make it toxic in some sense to certain viewpoints. I think that is a risk. So
it's like free speech and you do nothing with that.
Yeah, so there's a total balance between what I mean. It's like the other thing I was thinking through as we were talking about this in a more general thing. Is there's a lot of calls to decentralize social networks. You know, we see these documentary movies about Facebook, and The Social Dilemma recently came out on Netflix. And so, okay, fine, let's imagine we built a decentralized social network. Okay, well, who's in charge? And you're like, what do you mean who's in charge? We're all in charge. It's like, okay, if we're all in charge, then presumably we all are holders of some component of it, right? We've got to vote, right? It's like maybe you invested more money or you farmed or something. Imagine the governance system is structured this way. And there's no owner. It's like a sushi swap thing or so on, right? Okay, well, now we get to vote. Now we get to vote on what kind of content is allowed. And so is that a good system or is it a bad system? Because it might be the majority of people in one country decide that you know, this kind of content is fine. And suddenly we're in a situation where the minority is being oppressed and you know, like I like strawberries and people hate people who hate strawberries. And so like, you know, all strawberries are being banned and no one shall talk about strawberries. And you're sitting there going, what happened to freedom of speech? It's like, well, everybody's in charge now, so we get to decide. And in the real world, we've seen this example, you know, I spent a lot of time in California the last couple of decades, and we actually do have a fairly extreme form of government there, where there can be, I don't know, resolutions, I can't remember the right word, but there's a kind of government where you can vote in different proposals. For example, gay marriage is one of these things, legalizing weed was one of them, and you can propose these things as individuals, and if they get enough votes, they go to a more general thing, and eventually everyone in California is voting on this thing, yes or no. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it just becomes kind of chaos. But I think that is one example of, oh, someone's Zoom bombing us again. Hi. This is interesting.
Yep.
This is going to get bad.
1 second.
I think you might want to block non-speakers. And maybe record this. That's an idea.
Okay,
I like the idea
any
of-
more comments?
Yeah, I like the idea of if someone posts something that could be potentially slanderous or fake news or not, you just want to protect yourself, maybe a leaked photo, flooding the internet. I like that as a way of combating it. However, if someone's code was to be shared, or if a law that is about to be released by government is leaked onto something like this, I think what we're realizing, it's kind of again, I look to parallels or history to predict the future. You look at when Twitter came out first, it was like as if companies and their customer service agents weren't really trained that this is a public conversation in real time. And what happened is they actually needed to start having lawyers working in call centers working around the clock to make sure that their agents responded accordingly and appropriately. And you'll see a lot of fallout even still with many of the banks and their customer service agents. When it comes to law and a leak or something like that from a government, I think you'll need again to have technology working very closely with legal teams. If code is shared, code needs to be changed very quickly on the fly. Quick plugins, almost fallbacks to make sure that there's continuity of business as well. And this is the risk between private and public. I mean, but really, this private blockchains that are out there, these permissioned bubbles, that's not why it was created in the first place. There are benefits to it, but I think when you start using permissioned first and then going to unpermissioned or private to public, there's a time constraint on that. And depending on the use case that was highlighted earlier, the use case is very crucial to how beneficial that is.
Okay, actually today there were news that NVIDIA releases a new video codec that uses AI. Basically, they don't code the video of your face. They kind of scan it see how you what the emotions, and then reconstruct your face on the other side. So which is not a video, so it also raises a lot of legal questions. But okay, the next question, which is also interesting: if the system is decentralized and it run in many locations, it could be private blockchain too. Which jurisdiction should it follow? Like which laws? How do we define, or should we include all? Like, have you encountered such questions?
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
That's a very, very tricky one. Yes. In terms
I mean,
of
like, yeah, we had a presentation about halal smart contracts, and then we could have another type, of law, which is not really compatible. Like now, like Israel and UAE have a treaty, and everything's fine, but a lot of questions arise anyway. So,
I can give you an example of because we build we have a decentralized VPN architecture, and in that kind of system, it's the location of the nodes that are routing data within VPN. So, for example, Sweden and Germany have different kinds of data protection and protections for individuals or companies running nodes. It's one of the reasons why you tend to see a lot of Tor nodes, for example, in Berlin and Sweden, in comparison to other parts of the West. So in that example of essentially redistributing content, redistributing internet access, it is the location of the node that's running it. In other cases, and as we saw recently with BitMEX, there is, which is arguably not decentralized at all, but there is the ability for governments like the US to reach out to individuals outside of their country when that network is serving individuals within their jurisdiction. And so I think a lot of it depends on the specific kind of business, the kind of specific application. I think some people with the concept of the fair launch and almost like the anonymous launch, which is becoming back into the conversation. I think we may see systems in the future which will be sort of fair launch and anonymous, and almost like back to Bitcoin kind of concept. It's like, who is Satoshi? Like, why did he do it the way he did it? And we're all starting to realize why he did it the way he did it. It's like, oh, they did it the way they did it. Because, when you get successful and something happens, you're not quite sure exactly whose toes you're stepping upon. And I think that trend could continue. I think one of the things that, we were investor in Zcash at Pantera, and I've been asked a few times, what do you think the successor to any of these systems is? If somebody really develops a fully anonymous, highly scalable, kind of payment network, I very much doubt they will be funded or disclose who they are. I think it will be another Bitcoin style launch, and we'll never know who they are if they're smart enough. Because that would be, like a really scary thing to build and launch. So I think there's going to be an interesting future there.
Sorry, Paul, on your point about the laws and which jurisdiction would it apply to? I think if you look at, it's not surprising within the digital domain, and especially where blockchain technology is applicable, it cannot effectively be governed through either the traditional modes of governance. And I say this because, first of all, the emerging new roles that are coming out and the power relationships that exist in the digital domain, then, as I said earlier, they're not hierarchical nor horizontal. In fact, they are fluid, right? And because they're fluid with different roles and power relationships existing, and this sometimes often resides in a single anonymous actor. And the second part of blockchain technology, it enables trustlessness. It obviates the need for trust, whereas trust is fundamental to the functioning of governance, government, and the judiciary. So again, in the world we know, which is hierarchical, trust is implicit. It has to be there. in the world of blockchain technology, you don't have to have trust. So this is a fundamental, I think, the nub where when you ask, you know, is this or that, you're not comparing apple and apple, because this does not exist, trust. And trust, remember, is that invisible asset, and it's the most powerful asset that exists between any two entities. It's trust. You know, in the banking system, if there was no trust, the whole banking world will fall, you know, and so on and so forth. So I don't know if that addresses your question, which you asked earlier, Pablo.
Yeah, I agree to some extent. It's just a question, how do we do transition? So if you come to an enterprise and say, oh, issue your stocks on, put them on Uniswap and trade, you will be asked by your legal department, like, who's responsible if something goes wrong? And obviously no one, and you cannot blame Vitalik or somebody else.
No.
And then is it like risk which you cannot insure technically?
Well, I think you can, because if you look at it from, so if I move money, or if someone moves money or adjudicates contracts or taxes any form of transactions between two institutions or individuals, or simply store information, you know, if you look at that, that's financial services today as we move forward to this smart economy or these smart cities of the future where everything is interconnected. I mean, the web brought us so far. Now, I think as we try to drag the financial services sector into the 21st century, eventually, we're getting there right now. We've made huge leaps and bounds, but if you look at what's happening in places like next door to you guys right now, in Bahrain, you know, their government put all government bodies' storage into the cloud, like that,
AWS,
yeah, and that's something that's AWS. You know, that's a major move. It's a bold move, but it's a major progressive move for other central banks to see, and countries around the region. If we talk about this region in particular right now, and then you see that, and then you look at transactions. Right now, if I send money from Germany to the United States, the regulator is monitoring this right now. They're not in Abu Dhabi, they're in Europe and they're in America. And that's the way I believe that the transactions of data and the responsibility will probably go. Who receives it and who gets it? Anyone who touches it along the way still needs to be KYC'd in the old banking way, you know? So I think this highly efficient blockchain platforms we talk about, they still need to have a red phone, Batman type phone call going straight back to someone in the center. Otherwise, this Satoshi 2.0 is inevitable, really. It needs to be created, but I don't think I'm going to see it in the next few years in my lifetime even. You know, I might see it in my lifetime, but I think whether it'll get the far-reaching success of blockchain and Bitcoin, I'm not sure. That might be pessimistic. We'll see.
From my experience here, Dr. Pavel, what I could see is, I mean, still there's the governments and enterprises here, still they're not okay with going into cloud. So you could see what is their, as Michael had mentioned. So Bahrain was okay, they went into AWS cloud. But if you look into this region, more or less it's still in the data centers, and the local cloud is what they prefer. But I think eventually companies will disrupt. I could say, for example, companies like Hedera Hashgraph, which comes with a new kind of governance model for enterprises, wherein you run, you know, nodes run by 39 companies globally, and creating a different kind of public blockchain is where I could see things are moving in, right? So this is my thought here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. The companies are still struggling to move to cloud, and we are technically saying them, come back. Yeah, install a blockchain node, have everything with you, and which makes sense. I mean, especially if we talk about like some privacy, like very sensitive data, I wouldn't trust such company or any company. Actually, we had a funny case. We conducted conferences, we conducted sales of tickets for our offline conferences for a few years on some platform. Ukrainian one. And in 2017, so they register all the users, get all the emails, they process payments, and in 2017 they sent an email saying, oh, you know, to everybody, saying 4 out of 5 blockchain conferences in Ukraine use us as a platform. And now we decided to launch our own event and sending this message to everybody who bought through them. So, and we said like, wow, that's kind of not fair. So, and this issue will be more and more, will appear more and more. Like Cambridge Analytica case is just, I think it's just the beginning.
Mm.
And in the, some previous presentations, Pindar mentioned that now, usually land was a main resource, then labor, then capital, now entrepreneurship, and it will be like data. We will mine data and find the way to monetize it. So, and then obviously there is a trend to protect this data. And blockchain is one of the ways, at least, how to ensure that the data can be possessed by you and somebody else can analyze it without taking it somewhere else. So that's who is in the custody. Actually, my last question would be like a set of questions, but it could be outlined as one. In case of multi-signature, where you don't have a single party who is responsible for storing or transferring assets, who is the custodian? Like, you can have 10 parties who maintain the one of the 10 needed keys, and each one says, oh, I am not a custodian, I just maintain something. Or even you can store your keys on AWS, right, encrypted, and another key on Google encrypted, and Google doesn't know that they're storing the key. So, and here comes the question, like, who is actually responsible? So maybe you have some comments on that, because tightly related to governance.
I mean, I think whoever holds the secret, you know, the credentials to that key.
Maybe there is no secret at all. So it's not, you can use Shamir's secret shared scheme, or you can use just multi-signature M out of N, where there is no single one appearing at the end, which is the most secure scheme, obviously.
Yeah, well, then, and if you've got a multi-sig architecture, then whoever holds key is one of the custodians.
And if the key is encrypted, if the key is encrypted, let's say you take your key, you encrypt it, and then you cut in pieces, like Filecoin actually wanted to do with files on IPFS. So you keep it encrypted, and they do not know that they are storing the keys. So technically they are, but in reality they do not know.
Yeah, but someone knows how to decrypt the key, right?
Maybe
otherwise it's lost.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise there is
maybe the user.
Yeah. So whoever knows how to decrypt the key is a custodian. Like I said, whoever knows the secret, they're the responsible party, and there may be multiple responsible parties. So I think if you're looking at a liability question, it's whoever's able to control and access the resource, and that could be multiple people.
Well, surely if there are multiple signatures in the first place, all those party to those signatures should be made aware of what could potentially happen, including that. So if the four of us here were to agree to sign a particular document, we should know what's in the document before signing it. Surely, I mean, I'm just thinking from a logical point of view. It's I know what's being signed and Michael does, we all agree we want to be part of the signature. We should know that it also includes custodian or whatever, whatever the things that we're signing off on. So nothing should come and surprise us later that, we've all signed. And does that help, or am I
yeah.
I mean, the point is
yeah, I get it.
It's
not like a WhatsApp group where there's
no, I understand that. I understand it's not a WhatsApp group. I understand, but I'm just thinking.
No. What I mean is I'm agreeing with you. I just think that it's not as explicit why and who the custodian is, and I think that's the benefit of this. But I think when it comes to liability, there's no signing over anyone's head saying, who is that. But whoever takes it forward is obviously the custodian in this case.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and obviously the question of key loss or theft is also tightly connected. Like, who is actually responsible? There are many companies I know that wanted to escape the need to obtain the custodian license in US and EU, and there are some holes in the law right now that will be probably filled fast, and to a certain extent restrict innovation, because yeah, we see the value in decentralized autonomous applications, that even in betting, in exchange, technically it's not allowed, but it works. So internet was also, I was surprised, I read the book about like innovators from Walter Isaacson, and I was surprised that internet was not legal until 1992, where the Supreme Court said allowed external technical device to be connected to AT&T network. Before, you could not use networks to transmit data, and only after 20 years of courts hearings, they said they can use like external technical modems basically. And then the same fate had like Skype also, luckily positive. So that's one of the reasons why we're talking now video, for free, not free, but yeah, cheap, because infrastructure was considered like separated from the application. And later on,
Sorry, go on.
Just think for a second that we can start using WhatsApp and Telegram for sending transactions, financial transactions, encrypted, and they had no access to that. We put another layer of end-to-end encryption, send money, and we use just WhatsApp and Telegram as a transport layer, which has the notifications, which has the search and many things. They wouldn't be happy, definitely. They will try to block. Yeah, I think that will be the next wave of infrastructure hype. Okay, I think we wanted to say something.
No, I was just going to say that it's a major thing that's holding back anything to do with distributed ledger tech or blockchain at large is the fact that there's no liability. There's no insurance clause, safety net that the old systems, legacy pre-internet structures have, because they have been very much interwoven with the regulations and the governance of the various states around the world. Now, as I mentioned at the start, this idea of a smart regulator, not that they weren't smart before, smart in the case of smart technology, internet enabled. If we plan for the future and build in some type of safety net that protects the end user and that's transparent to a regulator, only then I think will we see the mass adoption of this, and we'll finally say goodbye to the overly cumbersome, slow, expensive infrastructure that's in place today. But without that, I think we're probably going to be talking in a vacuum right now in the future,
Yeah, connecting to that, there was a great article. It was by, it was said, the infrastructure phase, the myths, Union Square Ventures. I even will post it in the group chat because it really, there is no chat. You can Google the myth of the infrastructure phase by Union Square Ventures. They say that it's not like that we first develop the infrastructure and then start building applications. It's like first application, then infrastructure, again, new level of applications, new level of infrastructure, and it goes on and on and on. And it's never ending process. So in governance seems to be under attack right now. Like in general, like it should be redesigned. I talked to lawyers who said that no, you cannot have a decentralized application. By law, somebody always should be responsible, and you have to modify your blockchain applications to make somebody responsible. I said, like, well, yes, maybe I will, but Satoshi Nakamoto will definitely not. So who knows what to do? Yeah. Okay, on this positive note, or negative, I don't know, depends which side you are. I think we should be wrapping up soon. If you have any closing remarks, please do that now. It was an interesting conversation.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. It's been
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, much appreciated. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for, yes, it was enjoy and nice meeting my fellow panelists as well. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time as well, and all these technical challenges, you know, we had with this video tools, and that still shows that we are not yet on
we're not yet there as yet. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. But,
Pavel, would you mind introducing the panelists on WhatsApp or email or something after this?
Yeah,
nice to stay in
we'll
touch.
do that. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.